All right, we're sitting here after Inter Miami's 2-0 loss to LAFC at home. This is obviously Drive-In Stadium. Sat here with Alex Winley for 5 Reasons Sports. Here to break it all down. It was a tough loss. It seemed like Miami had control of the game for the first time in the first half this season. They controlled the possession, but just a couple of unfortunate errors at the back costed this team this game ultimately. There was the deflected Carlos Vela pass that turned into a goal, and then also the Breckshea red card that followed 2 minutes after, if that, that really turned the game, put Miami down to 10 men, and ultimately lost a little bit control in the second half. Some young players came out and shined, showed some fight and showed some effort, but at the end of the day, it wasn't enough to get themselves a goal, and it wasn't enough to get themselves a result. So, Alex, I mean, it was a good first half, but at the end of the day, what do you think really went wrong other than maybe the mistakes? Is there anything that you're looking for them to improve on going into Cincinnati on next Saturday?
Yeah, they didn't really create enough offensive chances for me. I know they did play a bit better in the midfield. Mo Adams had a huge game. John Mata did play well. Gregory did have a bit of a shocker, I will say. But they didn't create enough chances for me personally. There were a couple at the end there. The Yedlin chance, Lassiter came on. But they weren't consistent enough chances, and neither were they clinical enough. When you look at LAFC, they basically had one shot, one goal, and it's been a consistent theme now. We've been in 3 games already, and you look at the Austin game, Austin had about 7 shots and they had 5 goals. So Miami's just not being clinical enough, and if you listen to Neville's post-match conference, he even said as much that, the quality players need to step up. That is a bit of another topic for another day. Maybe they can be coached a little bit better, but I digress. But at the end of the day, Miami needs to start taking their chances again. They do have good enough players to be able to do that, but, once again, silly errors at the back, mainly by Breckshea, not to call him out or anything, mainly by Breckshea, and just not enough finishing up top really did them in today.
Yeah, Damian Lowe's insertion, by the way, back into the lineup was huge. I thought he was a really, really good player on the day, probably one of Miami's best, if not for maybe Mo Adams, who Phil Neville pointed out. But another thing that I would add on to that, Alex, is that Miami's offense was slow, really slow. And when they're on the ball, it seems like they're playing most of their game in their own half. And they've talked about, really being this counterattacking team that's going to work into transition offense, and I've said that time and time again. And this time in the first half, they were actually the team that was controlling possession. I think the number was exactly 51.8% possession, and when I did the passing numbers, 72% or just above 72% of their completed passes came in their own half. Only 60 in the opposition half, and to the end of the game, I think it was 100 and something, but they obviously lost a little bit of control after the red card. I think they need to move the ball quicker. They need to, and that has to do with the midfield as well. I think Gregory not being able to be the 6 that dictates play and dictates tempo, what kind of hindered them. He was making, a lot of failed passes, I should say, short ones at that, and he wasn't able to advance the ball other than his dribbling at some points into green space. But I think that Miami need to play quicker. I think Yedlin even touched on it. The short passing needs to be a little bit better. That's what's kind of the most frustrating for them. But at the end of the day, they couldn't get it done. And I think another thing Neville pointed out, too, was that in games where it seems like they're controlling possession, or times where they're controlling possession, they have the least chances and they have the least shots on goal. And for teams like LAFC and Austin, who has a really good attack now, it seems, that get those limited chances, they end up scoring their chances. They score their goals. I think that Austin had 6 shots inside the box, 5 of them went in. LAFC barely tested D up on the day, and then they ended up scoring twice. So it's just about being clinical in the final third, trying to make those passes into crucial areas, and I think that Miami's failing to do that, and it also has to come from not playing quickly enough. So we move on, right? We move on after the 2-0 loss. They go to take on an opponent in Cincinnati. What are you expecting from that game? We haven't even touched on the formation switch. Does Phil Neville stay with the same formation? Did it look okay for you? Would you rather go back to a 3-5-2? What do you see from there, and what do you see going into Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think the formation switch looked good, actually. Maybe it's an LAFC thing, but, if they play that against Cincinnati, they could go pretty well, I think. I know, Cincinnati's, they're an okay team, but they do have dangerous...
I was being nice.
Yeah, Inter Miami's in no place to speak, but... they do have good attacking players like Acosta, Brenner. On any given Sunday, really, they can hurt you. So if Miami's not careful, they can lose. And I know they've beaten them throughout their history, but yeah, it's a trap game, really. But I think they'll maybe stick with this formation. Not play Breckshea. I mean, he can't. He's suspended, but. I think they'll stick with this formation. Same center back, same fullbacks. Maybe Kieran Gibbs is there. Maybe Noah Allen starts. midfield will be tricky because, Gregory didn't have the best game, but he's also the captain, so I don't know if you drop him. Maybe Mata slots in there. Maybe you start Lassiter or Taylor on the other side. It depends. Does Higuain start? I know he was a little bit early today, mainly because of the tactical things, but, there's just a lot of options that Neville can roll with, but I do think there's problems deeper than that, and just, the fact that Yedlin said they can't even make a simple pass, that's pretty dire. He even said, like, they're professional athletes, they should be able to do this, but yeah, they need to get it together pretty quickly, or else it's just going to get worse, honestly.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out during training throughout the week, and then leading up until the game. We'll hear more from Phil Neville and some of the players during the week. I'll have that covered for 5 Reasons Sports. But with that said, they go into Cincinnati only having 1 point from their first 3 matches. They really need to get 3 points on the road, and then come back home against Houston Dynamo the week after that and hopefully get another 3 points. But with that said, as for Alex Winley, I'm Austin Robillard, and we will see you guys for another post-game reaction next week.